In a previous video, I promised to read one of my stories to you, and overwhelmingly you voted for the ghost story, so that's what we're going to read today. It's published in Haunted Yuletide, which is an anthology that has a lot of other fun ghost stories in it too. It's available on Amazon, and I'll put a link below. When I met William Bradshaw, he was sitting on a bench down by River Street, drinking coffee from a battered tin cup. It was New Year's Eve, and in his dark trousers, rumpled gray vest, and partly unbuttoned white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, he looked as if he'd just come from a party. I was wandering along the red brick plaza that edged the Savannah River, watching the boats carve their slow way through the swaths of moonlight that reflected off the water. I should probably have been watching where I was going instead, because I nearly tripped over William's long legs, which sprawled out in front of him. "Oh," I gasped as I pulled up short. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you there." A lazy grin spread over his face. "That's all right. Most people don't," he said, "but I'm glad you did. It's been a while since a pretty woman noticed me." His voice was rich and gentle, with the honeyed, drawn-out vowels of a true Southerner. He glanced around and straightened, his grin shifting into a slightly troubled frown. "You're not alone." I felt my back stiffen. I was a big girl. I could take care of myself. Still, I moved back a step and folded my arms across my chest, shrugging nonchalantly. "My friends are up at Wet Willie's." I waved a vague hand toward the bar at the edge of the plaza. I came out for some air. It was almost the truth. He relaxed a bit. "I'm sorry, only they say it isn't always safe here at night for a woman alone." I shrugged. "They say a lot of things." "Very true." He leaned back against the wooden slats of the bench, and the grin returned. He had the sort of mouth that looked as if it grinned a lot, but there was something sad and a little tired behind his eyes. Nostalgic. He was a good-looking guy, a little over average height, with muscles that looked as if they knew about hard work. It was difficult to tell how old he was, but I thought maybe a few years older than me, safely past 20, but not yet settled into 30. His grin turned impish. "They say, for example," he drawled, "that Savannah is the most haunted city in the South." I laughed. "Do they? Well, that I can almost believe." "So can I," he said, "with wraiths like you haunting the waterfront." A soft breeze off the water ruffled the pale folds of my dress, and my cheeks warmed as I tugged my sweater closer. He slid over on the bench, making room for me, should I decide to use it. "I'm William," he said. "William Bradshaw." He waited, smiling, for me to make up my mind. Well, I thought, why not? It was that kind of night. I slid onto the bench. "Rachel Moorland," I said. "Rachel Moorland," he mused, turning my name over on his tongue in that way only a Southerner can really pull off. I'd never actually liked my name, but he made it sound sexy. "Well, I'm very pleased to meet you, Rachel Moorland." He paused for a moment, and the mischievous humor returned to his smile. "You don't quite talk like a Yankee," he said. I laughed. "Colorado. I'm an art student. You?" He looked out over the river. "Oh, I was raised a few miles outside Savannah. My father grew cotton." He shrugged. "Cotton," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "And what do you do?" "Well," he said slowly, "naturally my father wanted me to follow in his footsteps, but I had ideas of my own, so I ran off and joined the army." The army? I wondered if he'd seen combat. That would explain the sad eyes. "So you're stationed at Hunter?" I asked, referring to the airfield the army maintains in Savannah. But then I realized his tousle of wavy hair was much too long to meet army regulations. "Oh, it's been a while since I was a soldier," he said softly. He drew a long breath and raised his tin cup halfway to his mouth, then stopped abruptly. "Where are my manners?" He shook his head. "Would you like some coffee, Rachel? I have another cup." He reached down to tug a small basket I hadn't noticed out from under the bench. Sure, I thought, because it's really smart for a girl to take coffee from a complete stranger in the middle of the night on River Street. "No thanks," I said. "I'm fine." He shrugged and leaned back, stretching his legs out in front of him again. "Well, you let me know if you change your mind." We sat for a while in companionable silence, watching the water slide by. After a while, I said, "So, the most haunted city in the South?" He looked at me sideways, raising one eyebrow. "That's what they say. Lots of pirates, wailing women waiting for their men to come back from the sea, dead soldiers from the war between the states." I smiled back. Maybe the dead soldiers are keeping the lonely women company. "Oh, assuredly," he laughed, "and keeping them safe from pirates, too." After another brief silence, he said, "They say," and waited for me to look at him again so he could wink at me before he went on. "They say that New Year's Eve is the best time to see ghosts." "Oh, do they?" I laughed. "They do indeed," he continued with mock solemnity. "Before the clock strikes 12 on New Year's Eve, just as the old year is dying, and before the new year fully asserts itself, time wears thin and the edges blur. All the years that came before blend together, and sometimes the things that were get mixed up with the things that are in unexpected ways, like an echo." His eyes held mine, and a shiver wriggled up my spine that had nothing to do with the chill in the humid winter air. "You're cold," he frowned. "Maybe you better go back inside." I laughed. "I'm fine. It gets a lot colder than this in Colorado." I eyed his thin shirt. "But aren't you cold?" "I don't really get cold." He shrugged and looked back up at the bright lights of the bar. "Your friends will be wondering where you are." My laugh came out bitter, and he raised his eyebrows at me. I hesitated. Then I told him, "There's no one waiting for me." I looked out over the water. "I came with this guy I met in my art history class, Kyle. I don't know him very well, but he's cute, and when he asked me out, I figured why not? Every girl should have someone to kiss at midnight on New Year's Eve, right?" I slouched down on the bench, hugging my arms around my shoulders. Turns out, when he drinks, he gets a bit handsy. So I left. "Are you all right?" William's gentle voice sounded genuinely concerned. I lifted one shoulder and let it fall. I didn't look at him. "I can take care of myself." He didn't say anything. After a few minutes, something dawned on me, and I sat up straighter. "But you brought 2 cups. Are you waiting for someone? I can go away if—" My voice trailed off as I turned and saw his face. The tired sadness had emerged from behind his eyes and now lay across his face, tightening his jaw and furrowing his brow. He dumped the remains of his coffee in the planter next to the bench and leaned down to tuck his tin cup into the basket. "I have been waiting," he said softly, "every New Year's Eve since—" He straightened and looked out over the river again. I followed his gaze and found that the moon had passed behind a cloud, and the water through which the passing boats drifted had gone black as ink. I looked back at his profile. He sighed. "She never comes." Then he turned to meet my eyes and smiled gently. "I suppose we all have our ghosts." I smiled back a little wryly. "I suppose we do." He drew a deep breath as if to clear his head. then stood and held out a hand to me. "May I walk with you, Miss Rachel?" he asked. He laid his other hand over his heart. "If I promise not to get handsy, I'd like to know you're safe before I go." I hesitated only half a heartbeat before I put my hand in his and let him help me up off the bench. He tucked my hand into the crook of his elbow so he could use both of his hands to settle a strap on his picnic basket over one shoulder. We talked quietly as we walked east beside the river, about my home in Colorado, about a swimming hole he and his brother played in growing up. The plaza narrowed to a walkway that passed between the river and a parking lot, and he shifted closer to me to allow a rowdy cluster of college students to pass. "10 minutes till midnight," one of them shouted, and we grinned and waved. When they had gone, William didn't widen the space between us. Neither did I. We followed the walkway around the end of the parking lot. As we emerged onto River Street, another group of students surged past on the opposite sidewalk. I tensed as I recognized one of them. Kyle punched one of his buddies in the arm and bellowed something unintelligible, and the whole group stopped to watch as he stumbled across the cobbles to where I stood. "There you are," he slurred. "We wondered where you got off to. Come on, we're leaving." He grasped my arm just above the elbow and pulled. I yanked my arm free of his fingers and said firmly, "Leave me alone, Kyle. I already told you, I'm done." "Aw, don't be like that," Kyle wheedled, grabbing my arm again, more firmly this time. "Come on, Rachel." "I believe the lady said no," William put in quietly. Kyle looked over at William, as if only just noticing he was there. The two men sized each other up. For a moment, I thought Kyle was going to start something, but when he looked back at me, he only said, "You don't waste time." He went back to his friends, and the whole pack moved up the street. I looked up to find William's serious eyes fixed on me. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Sure," I said. "I have a nice soldier to keep me company and protect me from pirates." I snuggled closer to him. His eyes searched my face one more time before the slow grin spread across his mouth, and he draped his arm around my shoulders. He smelled of coffee and the river. I wrapped my arm around his waist, and he gave my shoulders a gentle squeeze. "Hey," I said, "can we go to the Echo Square?" He frowned, puzzled. "Echo Square?" I think my mouth popped open a little. "You don't know about it?" I asked. "I thought you were from here." He smiled sheepishly. "River Street has changed some since I was a child," he said. "Why don't you show me?" So I tugged him back off the cobbled street and down a short red brick walkway into an open space. The shrub-filled planters that occupied the corners of the square were curved on their inner edges to create an open circle. Dark stone was laid among the red bricks to form a border around the edge of the circle and a bold X right across the center. I led William to the square of dark stone that lay at the center of the X and showed him the finer X scribed across it. "Now," I said, parking him in the center of that X and taking a step back, "say something." He looked puzzled. "What should I?" He broke off, and his face lit up. "Hello? But that's wonderful!" he exclaimed, laughing. "How does it work?" I grinned with him. "I'm not really sure," I said. "Something to do with an acoustic effect created by the shape of the planters and, well, I don't really know. All I know is if you stand on the X and talk, your voice echoes back to you and it sounds like you're speaking in surround sound." "Can you hear it?" he asked, and laughed again at the odd echo of his own voice. "Not from here," I explained. "You can only hear it if you're standing on the X." "Well then," William grinned, "maybe you better come stand on the X." He reached for my hand and drew me in so the two of us stood pressed close together in the middle of the X. When I looked up into his face, his eyes had gone solemn again, and something about the way he was looking at me made my heart start pounding wildly. Rachel, he said softly, and both of us grinned when the echo magnified the word. But then he went serious again. He brought one hand up to brush my cheek as his eyes searched my face. Across the historic district, the cathedral bell began to ring. Happy New Year, I whispered into the echo. The bell rang again, reverberating in the still darkness. Rachel, William murmured again. The bell rang. I know we just met. I caught my breath, and this time when the bell rang, my heart sang with it. I don't want you to think I'm... His eyes flicked toward the street where we'd seen Kyle. The bell rang. But well... He hesitated until the song of the bell nudged him along. You said every girl should have someone to kiss at midnight, and... He left the unspoken question hanging in the air until the bell rang. I laughed and cupped his face with my hands. Yes, I said, drawing his face down to mine. The bell sang out as our lips met. His kiss started out hesitant, but deepened and intensified as the night folded in around us, and the song of the bell stretched out, elongating, one peal blending into the next, wrapping itself around the hollow, echoing circle where we stood. He tasted of rich, warm coffee. He tasted of loneliness and of darkness and of time, of year piling upon year, gathering and condensing into a single, breathless, echoing moment. The final peal of the midnight bell still hung in the air when we parted. And for a long heartbeat, we only looked at each other. This time, when that lazy grin spread across William's face, his eyes held a quiet triumph. Thank you, Rachel, he whispered, and this time my name sounded like a prayer. Rachel? A shriller voice echoed from the street. Is that you? I glanced away from William for only a moment, for a breath, to see who was calling me. Chantel, a girl from my dorm. When I turned back, William Bradshaw was gone. I stood alone in a tiny, echoing space beside a river that ran like time from darkness into darkness, beyond darkness. The end.